I actually think that the immediate financial and political crises are over, and that this has been a sharp shock to the system and has knocked the Conservative Party into shape.
Welcome back to BVTV. I'm George Hay, EMEA editor of Breaking Views. I'm joined again from West London by Hugo Dixon, Breaking Views founder. Hi, Hugo. Good to speak to you again.
Good morning, George. Lovely to speak to you too.
Great. Well, the topic this week is appropriately enough Britain and its current mess. You've been examining the causes of it, and your sense is that it can be partly explained by the fact that UK politicians and citizens think their country is more special than it actually is. Can you elaborate on what you mean by Britain's delusions of grandeur?
Yes, I mean, I think that this is particularly something one sees in the Conservative Party. And one of the roots I actually trace back to the empire, the fall of the British Empire, and the reluctance to actually give up on the view that Britain is somehow super special. It punches above its weight. It has a special role with sterling being one of the world's reserve currencies. And I think that this particular sort of delusions of grandeur led to, among other things, Brexit. Of course, there were many problems, many other reasons why we had Brexit, and the rise of populism is not just a UK phenomenon at all. But there was a particular twist that appealed to a certain portion of British voters, conservative, slightly older voters, that we were special. We were the fifth largest country in the world economically. We had a seat on the United Nations Security Council. We didn't need to be part of the EU. We were somehow better and different. And I think it also led to Trussonomics. There was a view that, well, we don't have to follow the rules. The rules don't apply to us. We are special. Certainly, Trussonomics has come completely crashing down. And these are the delusions of grandeur, which I say also led, if you use a French expression, to folie de grandeur. The question now is, and I'm slightly optimistic about it, is where do we go now? And is there a more sober moment in British politics?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, what are the implications of, for now, of this new reality where we are actually less special than we thought or hoped we were? You mentioned that Larry Summers had compared Britain to an emerging market. And if it truly was, we'd have to consume less and cut debt and rein in our ambitions, etc. And that's clearly happening a bit. But is the UK doomed to decline, or would you be more positive?
I'm more positive than that. I actually think that the immediate financial and political crises are over, and that this has been a sharp shock to the system and has knocked particularly the Conservative Party into shape. Of course, there were still some delusional backbenchers who were trying to push the idea of a Boris Johnson return to Downing Street. But actually, I say this because I'm an old friend of his, but I mean, I think he has now been humiliated twice in the space of 2 months. And he symbolized not just Brexit, but what is called cakeism, which is the idea you can have your cake and eat it. An English expression, you can have the good things of something without the bad things. Whereas Rishi Sunak symbolizes sobriety, realism, living more or less within one's means. We're going to be poorer and wiser, and we've certainly got a difficult period ahead, because the full effect of Brexit hasn't been through, the recession, we're probably now in the middle of the beginning of a recession. These are not going to be easy times, but a lot of the rest of Europe has very similar problems too. And I no longer consider that Britain is the sickest man of Europe. And I think this short, sharp shock could be quite a useful catharsis.
You mentioned Rishi Sunak there. He's obviously just taken over as new Prime Minister. And I mean, to what extent are you kind of encouraged by him, though? Because I mean, you mentioned that he comes with a certain amount of qualities and credibility, but he's also a Brexit supporter. So to what extent is he really going to be able to tackle, or indeed reverse or adapt Britain's approach to Europe?
You're right, he was a Brexit supporter, and that issue is not going to be reopened not now, not in the next 5 years. I mean, I think it'd be another 15 before that could come back onto the agenda. But there still is a lot of mess to be cleared up, in particular, the whole question of Northern Ireland. I don't know what Rishi Sunak will do on that, but in the summertime, the early summertime, when there was a big debate within the UK cabinet about how to approach this, and Liz Truss, who's just giving up the role of Prime Minister, was pushing for a very hardline solution of unilaterally tearing up the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol, which was part of the treaty the UK agreed with the EU when it left the EU. Rishi Sunak was behind the scenes saying that he was not keen on such a confrontational approach. It's still very difficult to see how you find an agreement, but there will be, I suspect now, some sort of fudge. And I suspect that because it's not in either side's interest when we're going into a European-wide recession, to put more fuel on the fire and to burn even worse the relations, the economic and political relations between the UK and the EU. So I suspect we'll see quite a lot of pragmatism. And I don't think that he will have that much problem from his party, because they've been through such a trauma in the last few months. And they know that if they do something to kick out Sunak, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, I don't know how they will then avoid another general election, and they will be slaughtered. So I actually think he's got from a political perspective, he's moderately strong, and economically he has a bit of credibility, but sort of the decisions that have Jeremy Hunt, the finance minister who took over just a couple of weeks ago, has already put in train. I think that, I think that will sort of pretty much sort itself out. And you have to remember the UK, although we've got a debt problem, our debt problem, we've got less debt as a proportion of GDP than any other G7 country apart from Germany. So, you have to look at, in the land of the blind, who are the one-eyed people?
So you'd be cautiously optimistic about his political cover to do sensible things, and you think you can see from the markets he clearly has credibility. So it's really just a question of what he does with that credibility. But you're confident that he can do something non-disastrous.
Well, I am, but just to be clear, I think he's politically, I don't think he's going to have some problem, but that doesn't mean he's got much freedom for maneuver, because essentially he has to do what the markets expect him to do. So that will limit his freedom of maneuver quite considerably on a financial and economic perspective. So I think we'll see sobriety. And I think that this is the first big victory for the bond vigilantes in this market cycle. And I think it's also a warning for other countries. And so I sort of mildly optimistic, because I think we've had our crisis in the UK fast and early, and we're more or less the other side of it in terms of the peak crisis and the sense of doom and gloom.
Okay, well, that's a welcome bit of positivity. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us, as always. That's been BVTV. Thanks for watching.